Welcome to Control Alt Society. The topic really dominating our analysis today is this great unbundling of the smartphone. You know, that device we all called the remote control for life for, what, a decade? But now we're seeing a pretty seismic shift. Consumer attention and, frankly, billions in revenue are rapidly displacing onto ambient devices, watches, connected TVs, cars, even dedicated home hubs.
Yeah, it's happening fast. And this unbundling, it's driven by some pretty powerful foundational market forces. We see things like context beats capability, basically meaning specialized devices just work better than a general purpose phone in specific situations. And then there's business model gravity. Money just follows the clearest attention signal. The shift itself, it's undeniable.
Absolutely, undeniable. But the central question I think that we really need to grapple with today is whether this systemic fragmentation, is it a net positive evolution? Is it delivering genuinely superior, context-aware utility to everyday people? Or does the resulting complexity, and maybe more importantly, the consolidation of power among these new operating system owners, does that create significant new risks? Things like, consumer fatigue, digital equity concerns.
Right, and I'll be arguing that the resulting fragmentation, coupled with that increased gatekeeper power and, very real issues of digital equity, it poses a major risk, a risk to consumers and developers alike. I think we really need to be cautious about sacrificing, systemic robustness just for some surface-level convenience.
Okay, and I'll argue pretty firmly, actually, that this shift represents a profound and primarily positive evolution. We're moving towards a genuinely enhanced user experience, something more intuitive, more friction-free, the kind of ambient life that's been promised for ages. Look, the phone was always a bit of a compromise, right? Now we're finally designing for the reality of how humans behave outside of just staring at one single screen.
I see why you think that, and the vision is appealing, I grant you, but let me give you maybe a slightly different perspective here. While that philosophical goal of ambient utility sounds great, the ultimate outcome, I think, is going to be highly influenced by, platform economics.
But context is king now, and user behavior really validates this. The goal here is moving beyond the friction, the constant phone unlocks. Think about how many little micro interactions are now just, dismissed on your wrist or handled entirely by voice when you're cooking or driving. This leads to what some are calling zero screening, where the device acts around you based on where you are, what you're doing, without you needing to actively stare at a glass rectangle.
Okay, can you maybe elaborate just briefly on what you mean by zero screening in practice?
Sure. Think about interacting with your digital world without necessarily pulling out the main phone UI. Consider it like a simple grocery workflow. You ask a voice assistant to add items to the list throughout the day. Then later, your car navigation suggests the best store based on traffic. And when you get home, maybe the connected TV automatically displays the recipe you need. Now, that's a seamless, multi-surface workflow. It delivers massive efficiency. We're just reducing the amount of time people spend actively looking at a screen because the right context-aware surface, the watch, the car screen, the speaker, takes over that specific interaction. And what's more, the monetization shift we're seeing towards subscriptions and hardware-attached services, things like specialized health and fitness programs, well, that promises deeper, more integrated utility rather than just relying on disruptive, mobile-only ad tech.
Right. As a compelling vision, the silent concierge, as you called it. But have you really considered the systemic cost of that convenience? While, an individual task, glancing at your watch for 2 seconds, feels super efficient, the reality introduces major friction for the whole ecosystem. I'm talking about what the analysis calls fragmentation fatigue. Developers now have to support multiple OSs, multiple SDKs, and completely different interaction models, different design languages. You've got glanceable UIs for watches, voice-first interactions for cars and homes, and these sort of 10-foot UIs for TVs.
But aren't those different design standards simply the necessary cost of delivering that superior utility? Whereas you said context beats capability.
Maybe, but this complexity, it disproportionately benefits the incumbents. The OS owners, the people making the TV OS, the car OS, the watch OS, and it actively hurts the independent developer. You mentioned 10-foot UIs. For anyone listening, that's the design standard you need for a screen you look at from across the room, like a smart TV. The sheer effort required to take a complex phone app and translate it into, say, a handful of simple voice commands for the car, maybe some haptic feedback for the watch, and a remote-friendly layout for the TV. It's immense. It's a huge overhead.
I think the market will adapt, though. If the efficiency gain for the user is high enough, the incentive for developers to build those dedicated surfaces, well, it'll follow, won't it?
The problem is the consolidation of control. These OS owners, they control these new surfaces, and they effectively take a toll, a tax on discovery. This consolidation means platform rules and really high shelf rents, and by that I mean the cost just to get your app or service visible on the TV's home screen or the car's dashboard. They will inevitably mirror the exact same App Store debates we just lived through. Only now, these gatekeepers control access to really critical life services. And let's not ignore the equity issue here either. This whole ambient computing thing, it works best with newer, integrated hardware. This transition seriously risks creating a two-tier digital life, potentially leaving users with older devices behind, completely unable to participate in this supposedly seamless, efficient future.
Okay, I appreciate the concern regarding equity. That's a valid point. But let's address the systemic complexity directly for a moment. Because I believe the efficiency gain for the user is just too substantial to be outweighed by that development friction you're highlighting. Let's maybe dig into that trade-off, the one between contextual design and that systemic complexity.
Agreed. Yeah, that seems to be the core tension in this whole unbundling phenomenon.
Right? So designing for context, I argue, is fundamentally a positive step because it forces designers to achieve true, measurable efficiency, not just, maximizing screen time or engagement metrics. The key performance indicator isn't just monthly active users anymore. It's becoming the context completion rate. Did the watch actually complete the task in that crucial 2 to 3 seconds while the user was running? Did the voice interface handle the navigation input safely while the driver's eyes stayed on the road? This necessity, it ensures tasks get completed efficiently. Now, yes, this requires more effort from the builder. I concede that. But it fundamentally improves the outcome for the user. The phone simply evolves maybe into the control plane, managing the back-end stuff, while these specialized surfaces handle the precise, context-aware front end.
Okay, but that perspective, I feel, overlooks the massive structural overhead that really affects the long-term viability of the ecosystem. You're essentially asking developers to unbundle their product into this whole suite of microservices. I mean, imagine you're a small logistics company. You don't just need an app anymore. Suddenly, you need a watch widget for the driver to confirm delivery, maybe a voice intent for scheduling pickups, probably a TV app for the dispatcher back at the office, and maybe even a routine for the customer's home hub to notify them the package arrived. This fragmentation fatigue, it's a massive tax on innovation. Smaller developers just cannot afford to maintain code bases across that many diverse SDKs and design mandates, regardless of how efficient one individual task might become. The systemic difficulty of supporting, say, 5 fragmented systems, it just outweighs the minor efficiency gain of one microtask in isolation. That complexity is a barrier to entry, and it ensures that only the platforms themselves and the really well-funded developers can compete effectively.
That structural overhead, however real, I think is mitigated or at least balanced by the necessary shift in monetization that this context-based utility enables, which I think brings us neatly to our second major area of disagreement, the money.
Okay, yeah, and I come at this monetization shift from a rather different angle. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the primary driver for this budget migration is purely user utility. Let me tell you why. It's tracking limits. We know that privacy changes, particularly on smartphones, things like ATT on iOS, have severely curtailed the effectiveness of mobile performance advertising. They've limited the tracking signals.
Right, you're referring to signal loss on mobile. That's certainly a market factor, yes.
Exactly. And because of that signal loss, performance ad budgets are actively moving, quite rapidly actually, to places like connected TV and retail media networks, where better, more trackable signals still exist. Meanwhile, you see brand budgets moving to these OS surfaces. You know, the home rows on TVs, the map tiles in cars, the top results in voice searches, and these are effectively becoming page shelves. So to me, this looks less like some noble movement towards user-centric design, and much more like advertisers just chasing effective attention signals wherever they can find them, allowing platforms to charge a massive toll on discovery. And if those OS shelf rents get really pricey, which the downside scenario in the analysis suggests is, well, inevitable, then consumer choice will be limited by this kind of transactional gatekeeping. The user ends up seeing what the platform is paid to promote, not necessarily what's best.
Okay, I think you're maybe overstating the toll aspect and, frankly, entirely understating the immense value proposition of the subscription model that this ambient ecosystem really fosters. While, yes, budget migrations are certainly taking place, driven partly, I agree, by mobile ad tech weaknesses, the rise of hardware-attached services, what the analysts call attach rate optimization, demonstrates a true shift in incentive away from ads.
How so, though?
Well, think about it. When OEMs sell services like, say, dedicated safety packs for cars or integrated biometric performance programs bundled with a new watch, as recurring revenue alongside the hardware itself, their whole goal changes. Their priority shifts fundamentally towards integrated utility and stickiness, not maximizing intrusive ad impressions. This moves the focus away from those often unreliable last-click attribution models that plague mobile. The consumer is effectively saying, look, I will pay for premium integrated functionality that genuinely simplifies my life. And this allows the OEM to create a stickier, more valuable experience that's tied directly to the device, which I see as a net win for the dedicated user who's willing to pay for that real utility.
But that integration is only possible because the OS owner controls the entire environment. And that control, coupled with the reliance on these seamless, often unseen interfaces, well, that leads directly to our third point, doesn't it? The ethical and cultural implications of this so-called silent concierge.
See, I view the cultural shift here as overwhelmingly positive. We're normalizing new kinds of etiquette like talking naturally to rooms and cars, and we're moving toward a life where things like alarms, door locks, music, they just happen around you without a phone constantly interrupting the flow of life. This silent concierge idea, it provides significant accessibility wins too, through hands-free control for many people. Furthermore, privacy is being addressed consciously through things like privacy by design, utilizing edge processing for wake words, on-device personalization that minimizes cloud round trips, which is absolutely crucial for building trust, especially in sensitive environments like the home and the car.
That's an interesting point about privacy by design, though I would frame the overall picture quite differently. The helpful concierge, as you put it, can very quickly become, well, bossy, or frankly even a liability. The inherent risks of this kind of surveillance architecture are significant, particularly in safety-critical contexts. Or increasing reliance on voice-first systems in cars, for instance. Now, if a voice misfire leads to a driver distraction, or if the UI fails at a critical moment, those scenarios become genuine regulatory flashpoints. It's a massive liability concern when systems that are supposed to lower friction in critical moments actually introduce dangerous new complexities. I mean, we've all struggled trying to get a voice assistant to play a specific song or call the right contact, right? And when that frustration happens while you're driving, the potential consequences are far, far greater than just a dropped phone call.
But that risk is precisely why the design standards for these contexts are becoming so rigorous. Things like voice-first flows, glanceable cards, they're often dictated by safety requirements. The mandate has to be friction-lowering UX above all else in those situations.
Perhaps. Yet, the most worrying liability, I think, might be the data itself. This shift puts more critical, more intimate data, biometrics from wearables, home access status logs, incredibly detailed location history from cars, into the hands of these new OS owners. That question of who's listening, it just gets amplified tenfold when the microphone is embedded in your bedroom speaker and your car cabin. The gatekeeper holding that data now has unprecedented insight and potential control over your daily routines and behaviors far beyond what even the smartphone managed, even with the best intentions of edge processing, the concentration of power there is, well, it's immense.
Okay, so to summarize my position then, the unbundling is happening, it's probably inevitable, and I believe ultimately positive. It's moving us toward a life that's better optimized by context. Now, yes, we absolutely must address risks like data governance and accessibility. I don't deny that. But the massive improvements in contextual relevance, the friction-lowering user experience, and the essential move towards subscription utility over invasive ad models, these represent, in my view, a necessary and beneficial technological leap forward. The phone isn't dying, it's simply evolving into the robust control plane it perhaps always should have been, supporting a much more responsive, truly ambient life.
And I'd summarize by saying, yes, the shift is complex, but I maintain it's driven just as much by platform economics, specifically, the pursuit of walled garden ad revenues and hardware attach rates, largely because of mobile tracking signal loss, as it is by genuine user convenience. Without really strict regulatory and market oversight, the risk of fragmentation fatigue choking smaller developers is very real, and the consolidation of discovery control under these new OS gatekeepers is substantial. We have to remain vigilant, I think, about sacrificing digital equity and robust market competition just for the sake of some surface-level convenience, especially when the monetization increasingly relies on these expensive OS promotion slots and bundled services.
Well, clearly, both sides of this technological shift, the undeniable promise of ambient customized utility and the very real peril of fragmentation and gatekeeper control, warrant deep consideration. Builders, consumers, regulators, everyone will be navigating these profound trade-offs in the coming years.
Indeed. And the source material really suggests that the next few years will be defined by whether these context-aware systems truly end up serving the individual user, or if they primarily serve the powerful systems that own the new screens, the new speakers, and the data that flows through them. That there's certainly much more to explore within this fascinating transformation.